Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the A segment of episode 37 of The Loud House, Pulp Friction. We begin this segment with an imagination sequence. To be more specific, Lincoln is playing Ace Savvy and Clyde is playing One-Eyed Jack, and they're both being held captive by a villain known as Wildcard Willie, who's portrayed by Principal Huggins in this imagination sequence. Suddenly, the Full House gang arrive to save Ace Savvy and One-Eyed Jack, and some of you may recall that the Full House gang is the superhero identities of the Loud Sisters that appeared in the third short, Deuces Wild. Except in that short, Lily's superhero identity wasn't presented, but this time it is. Lily's superhero identity is the Deuce, just to clarify that for anyone who's curious. So we soon find out that this imagination sequence actually is a homemade comic book. Lincoln and Clyde made this comic book to enter a contest, and they have to deliver this homemade comic to the post office by 4 p.m. at the latest. The latest they can turn it in is 4 p.m. for this contest, and the winner of this contest will have their comic book made into an actual official Ace Savvy comic, and they'll have the chance to meet the creator of Ace Savvy, Bill Buck. And the kids who were listening to Lincoln and Clyde's comic book as they were reading it and showing it to them were impressed by it, and they are confident that Lincoln and Clyde will win this contest. But Principal Huggins arrives and he confiscates the comic book, accusing them of, well, he says that school is for learning, not drawing, even though it looked like they were having lunch at the time since they were in the cafeteria. And he decides to give them detention until 5 p.m., a full hour after the post office closes. So he locks them in a classroom and he makes them clean erasers for the entire duration of this detention. He also seals the window shut so they can't escape through that way either. And Lincoln and Clyde are bummed out that it looks like they're not going to be able to enter the contest. But then the Loud Sisters come in to save the day. At first, we have the twins, Lana and Lola, are the ones who not only get them out of the classroom by picking the lock, but they also hide them in what looks like custodial equipment in order to sneak them out of the school. But they also try to retrieve the comic book that Principal Huggins confiscated. And they try to use a distraction that Lucy summoned or called forth a swarm of bats in the gym. So Principal Huggins would run off to deal with that while Lincoln and Clyde try to get into his office to reclaim the comic book. Lisa distracts the school secretary with school budget-related complications so they can get into the office. But despite this elaborate plan, Principal Huggins manages to take care of the bat incident and leaves the school with the confiscated comic book still in his possession. And he drives off in a golf cart. The rest of the Loud Sisters arrive in Vanzilla, and they drive off to chase after Principal Huggins to reclaim the comic book. And Lori says they only have about a half hour before the post office closes. And they do run into some complications while chasing after Principal Huggins because Scoots is crossing the road, but she intentionally backs up to kind of annoy the Loud Sisters and Lincoln and Clyde because Lola was yelling at her to hurry up and cross the road, so Scoots decided to go backwards to mess with them. But despite this complication, the sisters are able to use their individual talents to manage to reclaim the comic book, and they do manage to make it to the post office before it closes. But when Lincoln and Clyde are preparing to hand their comic to the post office, they see Principal Huggins actually is at the post office too. And they find out that he has a comic book of his own, and it's a homemade comic book as well. And it reveals at least his first name. His first name is revealed to be Wilbur, and we don't know what his middle name is, but we know it starts with a T. So Wilbur T. Huggins is the principal's full name. And Lincoln and Clyde pieced together that Wilbur had apparently was trying to act. Wilbur's reason to give them detention was actually to knock them out of the competition so he could win. And Wilbur admits this is the case. He heard that after hearing about how great their homemade comic book was, he feared he wouldn't have a chance to win. But they question why this comic book contest would mean so much to their principal. And Wilbur reveals that when he was a child, he used to read Ace Savvy all the time. He actually is an Ace Savvy fan, and he read the comics when he was a kid. And we do see a brief flashback of Wilbur's childhood where he is reading the comic books, but some other kids ruin it, and they make fun of him for reading the comic book. And Wilbur admits that Ace Savvy's comics got him through a lonely childhood, and he wanted to win the contest to have the chance to meet Bill Buck, the creator, and thank him for making the Ace Savvy comics. But Wilbur admits that him misusing his position of power to remove Lincoln and Clyde from the contest so he could win was a low blow on his part. He fully admits that. He says Lincoln and Clyde are the ones who deserve to win the contest, and he prepares to leave to allow them the chance to win. Lincoln and Clyde admit that there was more to their principal than they originally thought. And Lincoln, hearing the story of Wilbur's childhood, gives him an idea. He and Clyde go to see Wilbur before he leaves the post office to explain that to offer a compromise. They can all have the chance to meet Bill Buck by combining their ideas, but they need some more time to make the revised ending of their comic. So Wilbur agrees to buy them some time by trying to charm the post office, the person at the other side of the post office. Her name is Lee. So while he's distracting her, Lincoln and Clyde make a revised ending, which has Wildcard Willie reveal that he had a tragic backstory, but then learning that he can make amends and do good with his position. So we have Ace Savvy, One-Eyed Jack, and Wildcard Willie are dealing with the Old Maid, a fictional character inspired by Scoots. And later on, we see Bill Buck is reading he's reading the homemade comic with the revised ending, and he's voiced by Jeff Bennett, by the way. And Bill Buck is impressed by it. He says that he really enjoyed it. He's seen comics with a lot of action in them, but he doesn't see too many with a lot of heart in them too. And he thought it was he liked their comics, so they won. And Lincoln and Clyde make a point to mention that the revised ending was inspired by the story of their principal, Wilbur Huggins, who's quite excited to meet Bill Buck in person. And then we have the Loud Sisters are also there too to meet him, and they're all excited to see what he thought about the characters that represented them. And Bill Buck gets the last word of the segment. He makes a pun regarding a full deck of cards in relation to how big the Loud family is, and that's how we end the segment. So overall, I did enjoy this segment a lot, and this was the second appearance of Principal Huggins. We now know his full name is Wilbur Huggins. Although we don't know what his middle name is. It starts with a T, but we got to learn more about Wilbur Huggins, and not just his name, but we did get a little insight on his childhood, and we find out that he's an Ace-savvy fan like Lincoln and Clyde are. And I did like the lesson they had here. There was a good lesson here about how you shouldn't misuse your position of power, and because, as Wilbur came to admit, he used his position of power as a school principal to give Lincoln and Clyde detention for an unjustified reason. His only reason was just to get rid of the competition for his chance to win the prize of the contest, but he came to realize that it was wrong for him to do that. And that stood out to me particularly because I have known my share of individuals in real life who, yes, they do unfortunately use their position of power as justification to, they try to mistreat people or dish out disproportionate retribution or think they're entitled to act however they want, and they justify it as, I have a position of power so I can do whatever I please. But that's not the right thing to do. So I appreciated that they recognized that Wilbur did this, but he came to realize it was wrong for him to do that, and that it goes against what Ace-savvy stands for. And again, it's another good lesson that just because someone makes bad choices doesn't automatically make them a bad person at heart. And, well, yeah, speaking of Ace-savvy, we did get to learn a bit more about the Ace-savvy comics. Like, we actually got to meet their creator, Bill Buck. I have a feeling that his name, his first name and his last name, both starting with the letter B, is probably a reference to the fact that, at least in Marvel, at least a lot of the Marvel characters that Stan Lee created have alliterative names. That is, their first name and their last name start with the same letter. I have a feeling that was a reference to that, and I liked him. I liked Bill. He was a fun character. He kind of does remind me of Stan Lee from what I've seen in the interviews and from what I've heard about people who've had the chance to meet him. He seems like a nice guy, and Bill seems like a nice guy too, so I thought that was a cool touch. We got to learn a little more about Ace-savvy. But another detail that I really liked about this segment was, well, this is another example of the Loud siblings all working together and proving to be a very effective team. And it was especially heartwarming this time because, well, this was about something Lincoln is interested in, comic books, and the Loud sisters actually went out of their way to help Lincoln out with, something that means a lot to him and actually wanting to take part in it. And I thought that was a really nice touch because previous segments and episodes seemed to imply that the Loud sisters never really were interested in doing things that Lincoln liked to do or particularly showed much interest in his interests. I know Sleuth or Consequences in particular was notorious for many viewers for having the Loud sisters ridicule Lincoln for his interests. Even though Lincoln didn't let it bother him, they still thought it was kind of a low blow on their part. So seeing them actually take interest in something that Lincoln is interested in was really nice to see. And some people might make the argument that, as Lola put it, like they might have just did that because it was a chance to become famous. At least that's what Lola said. But I mean, maybe that was just talk, big talk, and I still think it was a nice gesture all the same to see the Loud sisters actually show interest in something that Lincoln was interested in and actually taking part in one of the activities he would like. So I thought that was a nice touch. I think that kind of reaffirms the intended lesson of the Loud House about the importance of family because, like I said, there are some segments that make people question how strong the Loud family is, but I think this segment shows, the Loud family do have their moments of getting along with each other, and I think, they did a good job at showing the Loud siblings all working together and being an effective team, and I think I like that. I wish we had more segments like that, and, well, it was a good touch. I did like that. So, there you go. I like this segment a lot overall. It was definitely one of my favorites. Like I said, we got to learn more about Wilbur Huggins, got to learn a little bit more about his backstory. We now know he's a fellow Ace Savvy fan, and we got to meet the Ace Savvy creator, and we got a segment where the Loud siblings are all an effective team that work together really well and reinforce the importance of family. So, yeah, this one was a winner in my book. As to be expected, we'll be discussing the B segment next. Take care, and until next time.